time. Better live it today. Take a stand. Meet your dreams halfway. Leave behind all the fear and doubt. And welcome to your beautiful now. Hello, everyone. Derek Floyd here, Beautiful Now Podcast. Welcome to another edition of Beautiful Now Live. Now, this is the segment where I interview special guests about things that are topical, relevant to you, your family, and your community, and to your daily life. And if you enjoy this type of content, do me a favor. Please hit me with a like and a subscribe, and hit the little bell right next to it. This will let me get the most updated content to you as soon as it's available. And as always, do me a favor and share this content with a friend. We want to make sure everyone leaves uplifted, encouraged, and inspired. Now, today's topic may be a challenging one because a lot of us have been hearing about all the racial tension and racial divide in our country, especially with the George Floyd murder coming up over a year now, and so many other things have happened along the way that have just challenged us to say, is there systemic racism in our country? And how do we even begin the conversation? How do we talk about race with our neighbors, our family, our friends? There's a program on YouTube called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black man, my Emmanuel Ocho, who started this whole process and has done a great job of bringing in different people from all walks of life. But what about you? How do you have a conversation about race with your neighbor, your friend, your colleague, even your family? Well, today I've got a couple who's come on to talk to us about a program they've written called Can We Talk About This? It's a 4-week program that takes you through lots of techniques of how to actually open up the conversation and figure out how to communicate with each other, how to find common ground, and how to have the uncomfortable conversations about race. So if you've been struggling with this and how to figure out how to talk to your conversation started, well, this topic and this segment is for you. Will you please help me welcome my good friends, Kent and Sharon Lovelace. Hello, folks. How are you today?
Hi, Derek. Hi, Derek.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, there they are. There they are. Good to see you guys.
Yes,
Good
likewise.
to see you.
Man, we are so excited to talk about this program. Can we talk about this? People have been asking me about it for a while. I'm so glad we get to bring them the content that can help them have a good conversation about race, right?
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
We're excited
Awesome.
to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the questions because this is important. Race has been a sensitive topic for years in the world, just Christian or secular. It's just been a sensitive topic. Do you think it's uncomfortable, or why do you think it's uncomfortable for Christians to talk about race? What do you think?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I think it's an uncomfortable topic, especially for Christians, because when you have to address the issue with race in the church, first of all, it's hard to even accept that there is issue with race in the church. And then secondly, if you do say that it is, then you have to take on responsibility to do something about it. So I think that's why it's uncomfortable.
Wow, I love that explanation. It's like if you acknowledge it, then you have to own it and do something about it.
Yeah.
People don't want to do that. They don't want to get their hands
Right.
dirty. You know?
Right.
Exactly.
So well spoken. So well spoken. Do you think there's such a thing as a racist Christian? I mean, how would you even recognize that? Kent, what do you think?
Well, I think that we don't come to church like blank slates. We bring into our Christian community that which we have experienced in the secular world, and so if a culture is dominated or has a lot of racism in it, then it stands to reason that those same attitudes may find their ways into our Christian communities as well, and can influence how we interact with each other and or don't interact with each other.
Wow. And you guys built this program out of a desire to make a change. What started you along this path to say, how can we talk about this? What made you go, I got to do something?
Well, Derek, it kind of reached a point where we felt we had to do something last summer when we saw the killing of George Floyd. We ourselves are not organizers or we don't consider ourselves social justice
Activists.
in any way, shape, or form. In fact, we're quite the opposite. But it was so heavy on our hearts to see this man basically murdered on a street corner. It just prompted us to have to try to do something to help us to start to have this conversation. There's a lot going on under the surface in our churches. We go to a multi-racial church, a multi-ethnic church, and I think a lot of times we smile and we sit, next to someone in the pew, but we kind of mask the pain that's going on, and so we felt like it would be a good thing to do that to try to get a deeper conversation going.
Wow. That takes courage, because everybody says, well, what can I do? But you guys said, you know what? We can do something. And you started that something. Can we talk about this? So that's just amazing. I'm sure you've probably heard the TV program Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man with Emmanuel Ocho, which I'm a big fan of. As we've seen this program take life, I'm thinking to myself, we should have these kind of conversations at church. I'm thinking, don't you think this is something every pastor should maybe kind of unveil to the church in a way to kind of have these uncomfortable conversations? What do you think?
I would say yes, because what Kent just stated, I would like to add to that from the perspective of it's usually not awareness. The reason that we took the step that we took is because of awareness. When you become aware of all the things that's going on, it's like we started with, you have to address it if you acknowledge that there is an issue. So, yeah, I think that especially if you have a diverse community, if people are hurting, you have to address the pain because, as Kent often says, if you don't say anything, then that tells us something.
Yeah, and I think if a pastor is not acknowledging that there is hurt, there is pain, then like what Sharon said, that's a message as well. You have to take ownership of this problem and deal with it as best you can. You're not going to get it right, but none of us will. But at least allow space for God to do work on a deeper level. Otherwise, it's just window dressing to have all these different ethnic groups together, sitting next to each other, but there's all this hurt underneath. That's what is that? That's not the body of Christ that God has called us to. That's not the unity, the level of unity that Christ has called us as his body.
I know that, you and I have talked multiple times and we've expressed it, what we've walked through in our lives colors how we see things, changes our perspective. And with so many of us going through so many different things, maybe when we see race one way, it's because we've walked through life one way and they're on the other end. But I know Sharon has said too, you've got to meet me in the middle and communicate, right? There's got to be a way that this happens. Sharon, what do you think about that? Meet me in the middle, understand where I come from.
I think that's critical because we all come with biases and we have different perspectives. And unless we sit down and we talk about it, we don't recognize it. It's like when I wake up in the morning and go out into the world, may be different from someone that's Asian or someone that's white or whatever race they may be. Their experience may not be the same as mine. So while I might get tired and frustrated because they're having this conversation over and over and over again, I have to step back and say, what am I missing? What am I not seeing here? And how can I help with this situation? That is what I believe every Christian is called to. It's different than the world. We expect from the world. It's like what David said, if it was someone else who had done this to me would have been okay, but it was you, my brother. It's you who's in my same household. That's the part that is more painful, is to feel like you're not seen by those that should see you. And I'm not saying every cause is one to fight about, but there are some things, the blatant injustice or injustice that we've seen over 2020 is not something that can be ignored.
Well spoken. Knowing what we've seen then this year and how uncomfortable it's been to talk to a neighbor, to a friend, to a colleague, how early should we be teaching our kids about race? How early should the conversation begin? Should we say this is what this is about when they're 4 or 5 years old? Because you put three kids in a room and they're 2 years old and they're all different colors, they're not going to care. Racism is taught. It's something that's a learned behavior, unfortunately. So how early should we be addressing this issue? What do you think?
Well, I think because it's a cultural, it's deep within our culture, it should start pretty early. I'm reminded of the experiment done back in the 60s where they took 25 black children and 25 white children, and they spread out a bunch of dolls. Some were brown, some were white, and the children were asked, which doll is beautiful and which doll would you rather be? And overwhelmingly, both black and white chose the white dolls. So you can see from that, I think if we repeated that experiment today, we'd probably get pretty much the same results where all the kids chose white dolls over brown dolls. And so you could infer from that probably from 3 or 4 years old, the conversation should begin.
Wow. I'd never heard that experiment. That's amazing. Send me the link about that one after the program so I can check that out.
I definitely will. We can add it to the show for sure.
Yeah. And what about schools? Should schools be involved in changing the narrative about race? What do you think, Sharon?
I think that schools should be involved. The only issue that I have with schools is that they're already teaching history, but they're only teaching a part of the history. And I feel that our story is not being told. And I think it's up to parents. And I know from the people that I'm aware of, they're teaching their own children our history. They're teaching them information. I mean, just like in 2020, I learned more about my own history than I had ever known because I never learned it in school. And because unfortunately my family didn't talk a lot about it. There are bits and pieces, but the true history that I'm coming to learn is not something that I knew prior to now.
So definitely it becomes, we got to get to this early. We got to teach them all about what's happened so that their lens can change,
Right.
Very well spoken. Very well spoken.
Teaching it to them in a positive perspective, not a victim's perspective, not
Sure.
blame, not shame, but here's what has happened, and here's where our journey is, and here's our progress. And I think that's very critical. This is where we've come from, royalty, kings, priests, just a good, rich heritage. And although these things have happened, we are still here and we're still surviving.
Yeah.
So let's push on, and also helping them understand how important it is to have God in the center of all this.
Yeah.
So I think that's critical because our forefathers did. In
Sure.
spite of everything, they did.
Right.
That's true.
They used songs and everything to just tell stories to where we're going to meet, what we're going to do. So anyway, I didn't mean
Sure. No, you're okay. I love it. Let's go a little bit more into your program itself. Can we talk about this? You've put together a 4-week program, 4-project program that tries to help open up these questions. What do you feel has been the hardest part for people to understand in the program? What's been the biggest challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is getting our brothers and sisters to participate, to take a step out and start the conversation. I think that by and large, particularly our white brothers and sisters are afraid to have this conversation. And so the hardest part is letting people know that this is not going to be a beat down session. This is going to be an open dialogue and in the love of Christ. We're coming together to try to work on our unity and just understand each other and where each other are coming from. Why are Black people so upset? What is it that's going on? How are we doing? Is it just that we just, we see each other on Sundays and wave and hug, and then we go our separate ways. And is that what we're called to, or are we called to something deeper? And so it's just about starting a conversation, having a conversation, open and honest, without defensiveness, without any blame or any of that. Just loving each other in Christ.
I love that you said you have the conversation without blame, without shame. We're just trying to talk. We're trying to communicate, asking the questions of how did this happen to you? Why do you feel this way? Why do African Americans feel this way? Or how has the George Floyd murder affected all of us in these daily times? I've even had people ask me or say something like, well, it's better now, isn't it? We had a black president. Everything's all good, right? Racism is gone. But I've heard that, or
Yeah,
I've heard I'm not racist. I have black friends. You guys have heard those too, right?
yeah, yeah.
Where do you go with those discussions? How do you gauge that? And can we talk about this fine?
Well, I think that when you hear the phrase "I'm not a racist," you have to kind of define what racist means. In 1619, when the first Africans arrived here, to be anti-racist or non-racist would be able to say, I'm against slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And up until about 1915 or so. I mean, if to be non-racist meant, I think that all races should have equal education. Back in the 60s, when
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing with the Board of Education, when schools were desegregated, that's what it would mean to be not a racist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, you know, in the 80s, to be able to say I have a black friend would be not racist. But today, in today's time, to be not a racist, you have to actually be socially advocating for equal rights for all minorities, equal pay, equal educational opportunities. So it's like racism evolves, and so the fight against it has to evolve as well. And
Mm.
so, we try to talk about those kinds of issues and let our brothers and sisters see what you know what we feel and what's going on. What are we facing? And that there is a very big difference between the America that I live in and the America that someone else might live in. We look at different realities every day, and it begins with awareness.
I love that you said, it's a different reality, it's a different thing as it's evolved. We thought in the 60s it meant this, in the 70s it meant that, and as it's grown, as it's evolved, we have to change our perception of what racism means and how we can engage to take down the walls, if you will, that have been underneath all this time. I think that's a great way of looking at it. So great answer there. Great answer there. I think, like you said before, a lot of people may have biases they're not aware of. I know I've met multiple people over the past 6 months to a year that are just like, oh, I don't have any biases. I'm just fine. Well, let
Yeah,
me uncover a couple of things with you.
yeah,
But it's not in a malice or a hey, I'm trying to make you feel bad. It's like let me help you understand where it may be because you've got a different pair of glasses on that you see with than what I do.
Absolutely.
So, do you feel like it's easier to address that now? Like in your program, is it easy to address those biases, and how do you start that conversation off?
We start the program with our first session is looking at biases because we all have them. I don't care who you are, you have biases. You have a way of seeing things. And it's different. And even within races, the biases are different.
mm,
So to think that people don't have them is not realistic. And that's the first thing we do is we do a series of slides, and with that we have them write down something about what they perceive from that slide, and at the end of it, that's when we bring it all together. We all have biases.
yeah. Wait.
And this one's for you, Sharon. I think we've talked about it a couple of times. Once you guys discover that bias, you discover that thinking. What's the next step of removing it? Like, how do you help them change it?
um like I always say, it's like being an alcoholic. You have to first acknowledge it. Once you acknowledge or you see that there's something that's happening, and for me as a Christian, I always say, come before God, ask Him, show me my heart. Show me where I may have biases, or show me where I'm not in line with your will when it comes to race and reconciliation. And then from there began that process. But it starts there. And then after you have come to that place, then you seek, what can I do to make a difference? What kind of relationships can I form? And after that, how do I commit to following this out? Because dealing with this is not, as we know, because it's been going on in the United States for over 400 years. So it's a commitment. It is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's something that's going to go on for a while. And for me personally, I may spend the rest of my life seeking opportunities to bring healing and reconciliation, not pointing fingers, not doing shame, not saying whites against black. It doesn't matter. We will find differences if it's nothing but eye color, because this is it's a spiritual warfare. It is not flesh and blood. That's what the Bible tells us. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. So it is a spiritual battle. And if we understand that, regardless of where we are, whether we're Christians or non-Christians, we're all spirits. And because of that, that means it's a battle beyond our physical beings.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm gonna close this in this last question. You guys have been fantastic, so thank you so much for taking the time to actually talk to us and share what you've done. I know, Kent, you had mentioned to me it was 4 parts to the program. Can you break down the 4 parts so that they understand what they're going to get involved with, that the program is sent to them?
Yeah, sure. So the ultimate goal, again, is to just start the conversation. It doesn't have to be a perfect conversation, but it's starting the conversation. And the first workshop, we talk about implicit bias and the fact that we all have them. So, that first workshop is about becoming aware that you have biases. We all have biases. The second workshop concerns itself with understanding the pain in the Black community. Why are were people rioting in the streets? Why are people up in arms? Understanding where this is coming from, and it's historical perspective on it. The third workshop deals with coming together as one, mutually discussing our needs and our wants and desires. And then the fourth workshop deals with a concept that we found by an author named Jamar Tisby. It's called ARC. It's an acronym for awareness, commitment, or awareness, relationship, and commitment, ARC, A-R-C. And so we talk about being aware of your community, being aware of brothers and sisters around you and what they might be going through, being aware of your biases, to reaching out and developing relationships, similar to what Sharon was just sharing about the friends that she meets with on a monthly basis, where they work on their relationship. They learn about each other and each other's communities. And then the third is commitment. The C stands for commitment. That's committing to do whatever you can in whatever capacity that might be, whether it's showing up at a PTA meeting or a town hall meeting, making your voice heard. Committing to reaching out to people of other ethnic groups within your church or within your community, being a bridge, being a conduit for God's love. And so that's the four pieces of it. But ultimately, it's just about talking, getting the conversation.
Wow. Well, you know what? I wanted them to hear what was involved with it, because as we've talked about the program, I believe it is more than just for the church. I believe it will start at the church, but I believe that the way you've constructed this program and the heart for which you have built it, the communication needs to happen outside of the 4 walls of the church. It needs to happen at a business organization. It needs to happen at a company. It needs to happen wherever there's a group of people that are trying to understand each other. This should be there. So if anyone is watching this program today, how can they get a hold of you to get it for themselves?
My email address is K Lovelace, like my last name, Lovelace, followed by another K, gmail.com. So just reach
Awesome.
out to us, and we'll respond.
And this
Derek,
program is free, right? It's free.
yes.
It's free.
Well,
Yeah.
come on, guys. It's free. You're giving away love and wisdom. How can you do it? It's free.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that we understand that race is a modern term. It's not something that was, the Bible does not define race as we do. They defined it as we are a race of people. And it's totally different than what we talk about as race. And all of us are of one nation because of Jesus. We're all image bearers because of Jesus. So it's a whole different perspective than what we talk about. So we understand that it's systemic. We understand it's a worldview for today. So it does impact everyone. It's not just the church. It's anyone who lives in America or any place, really. You understand that there's issues here with this.
Wow. Well, we are so excited. I can't wait to get to the entire program myself. I've only seen a couple parts of it so far, so I have to watch it. But I sure do appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. If we can't bring you back on part 2 sometime, you can tell us more about how the program is going. Thanks, guys.
For sure. All right.
Thanks
so
Derek.
much.
Have a wonderful
It's been an honor.
weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So we want to thank our guests again, Kent and Sharon Lovelace, for talking about this incredible program, Can We Talk About This? And hopefully we've shed a little bit of light on how you can begin the conversation with your friend or neighbor or colleague about race, trying to bridge the gap, trying to learn to communicate. We hope this has given you some insight. And as always, we look forward to seeing you again next time